Over the last few days, the news about the open source initiative's crazy shenanigans regarding their elections has kind of reached a fever pitch. They've announced their new candidates. Some candidates are not too thrilled with how things went down. I covered this a little bit yesterday, but we have one of the actual horses with the actual mouths here with us today. Everybody, I need you to understand who we're talking to here. So the guy to my side is Bradley Kuhn, the adorably haired man right over there. Now, when it comes to software licensing stuff, Bradley Kuhn is, and I only reserve this word for a few people, kind of a legend. So whether you agree with him or disagree with him on something, he was an executive director and a board member of the Free Software Foundation. Puts him up there. He was at the Software Freedom Law Center. He was, were you the first executive director of the Software Freedom Conservancy, or?
Yes, indeed, I was.
You were the first one, right?
But I'm very bad at management, so no, I am not.
It's okay. You were heavily involved in AGPL's development, on and on, right? So he's been in and around open source and free software licensing since roughly the Middle Ages. So when you're talking to someone who needs to have a knowledge of open source licensing, there's maybe like 3 people that you'd put on the top
of that
list.
I'm in my Middle Ages now.
Correct. Yes. So when the Open Source Initiative held elections for new board members around to help govern the open source definition and whatnot, you'd think, yeah, maybe you'd want someone who's been in and around open source licensing for like 1,000 years involved with that. But then things went nuts. So luckily we've got Bradley Kuhn here, who is just adorable to hang out with us and talk about us. Say hello to the universe, Bradley.
I'll say hello to your universe. Hello, yeah. So, I mean, it's exciting for me to talk to you again. We've known each other, what, 20 years? I think
something like that. Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. And so, yeah. And I got to start out by saying, but you and I both, we love to talk about the elephant in the room first. And
what
also,
could you possibly be talking about, Bradley?
Well, and also we both, I think we both have been through the situation where you do something or say something, and both the people who support you are mad at you, and then the people who don't support you are saying, you see, this is why we never supported them, because we hate them. And so, I mean, there's going to be a lot of people who are big fans of mine who are going to be asking me all week, why were you on Brian Lunduke's show? And, and I want to give the answer at the beginning of the video because they might stop watching. So I want them to see at the beginning to have the answer to the question. And from my point of view, I disagree with you on some very big topics. I mean, that's obvious, I think.
Okay.
If you read stuff I've wrote,
that's an understatement. I am pretty confident that if you put like a bullet points of like our top 10 political stances, we're going to disagree on all 10.
Okay, well,
probably.
Listen, but the thing is I watch your videos. I don't watch them all. You are some kind of machine because you've got like so much content coming out all the time. Your work ethic is impressive.
Thank you.
But so I can't watch them all. But every 6 or 8 weeks, I kind of page through the Lunduke list and grab a sampling. And it is true that on most videos, I probably agree with 10% and disagree with 90, something like that. The last one though, yesterday's, I agree with 90 and disagree with 10, but you also said how awesome I was. So, it's pretty easy to agree with 90% of that.
But that was a shoo-in.
One of the things I think we agree on is we both agree deeply in the right to free speech and the importance of people who disagree being willing to sit down and have a friendly dialogue like we are right now. And I think one of the biggest problems we have right now is the inability for people who strongly disagree to sit down and just like talk about what you disagree respectfully and say, this is how I feel, this is how I feel, you feel, and so forth. I think a lot about, you're a student of history and history of journalism, I know, so you probably are familiar with William F. Buckley, who is basically a paragon of conservative thought. Yeah. And he used to have this TV show, and there's nothing like of his kind, where he would invite people on and they would discuss. They wouldn't just like yell at each other. They would respectfully discuss the biggest issues of the day, epistemology, philosophy, and he would always have Gore Vidal, not always, but often have Gore Vidal
several
on, one of the
times,
liberal icons of thought, and they would sit there and talk about what they disagreed about in a way that was very informative to the public, and we don't have enough of that these days. So that's why when you asked me to come on, I was like, yeah, I'll come talk to Brian. I disagree with him,
man.
But on this stuff, we probably have a lot of agreement.
Okay. This chat, again, we're going to disagree very little, but most of the time, right. I want to repeat this out there for all the people who are getting ready to go attack Bradley Kuhn right now. He disagrees with almost every word out of my mouth. Make that very, very clear. Okay.
Well, yeah, but one of the things I really like is, I mean, you just ended your last video with saying, you don't want to be beholden to big tech, and a lot of what is called tech journalism is parroting press releases from big tech companies. I've always respected your ability to not do that. You don't parrot what the big tech companies say to say.
To be fair to all the tech journalists out there, they're kind of between a rock and a hard place. If they attack, say, IBM, like IBM does something naughty and they attack IBM, they just lose all of that IBM ad revenue and they're out of business. Yep. Their profit margins are like razor thin. They're barely in business as it is.
Is dangerous.
It's rough. I feel bad for them. I honestly do.
I do too. Yeah. But there are some great sources out there. I would give a shout out to like Thomas Claiborne of the Register. He writes interesting stuff. I talk to him a lot.
He tries.
I think we're already disagreeing. Quick, let's get the stuff we agree about because we're already disagreeing.
Yeah, no, exactly. So like the Register is an interesting example. They do some legitimate tech journalism, and when they do it, I like to call them out because I'm like, look, someone's doing something that's real. But then at the same time, you can see like again, like IBM or Red Hat examples. You're like, oh, wait a minute, something bad happens to IBM. They kind of turn the story around to be like, well, IBM's not being so bad, and they have to do that. And you can almost see the writer behind the keyboard feeling awful about themselves for writing it, and I feel terrible for them for. I digress.
Well, but before we get too far into stuff we might disagree about, why don't we talk about the issue of the day, or the week? Which is just huge. This is what's happening.
So I gave my crew a big primer on this for yesterday's show.
I've seen yesterday's show. So
I want to hear it from your point of view.
I'm up to speed. I mean, I wrote most of the content, but I'm up to speed on nonetheless.
Yeah. No, it was a lot of screenshots of things you wrote. But
I saw that.
I want to hear it from your point of view. So what I understand of this, it looks like from someone totally outside. I wasn't running. I'm not part of the open source initiative board. The open source initiative, they don't love me, right? So I don't have a lot of conversations with them lately. But from the outside looking in, it looks like almost every other week they're deciding to change rules to force people that they were disagreeing with out. Like, you can't run for board because you were being critical of us, and oh, look at the time, we just changed the rule to include a different time zone thing, and now you can't run at all. Oh, what? Oh, you and Fontana, you guys were kind of being cranky about us a little bit. I mean, you guys had some criticisms of like OSI's code of conduct things and various other stuff, and it seemed like the OSI was having a petty knee-jerk reaction and saying, well, we're going to change rules after the fact to try to make it so we don't even have to tell people how many votes you got in an election that you were in. They almost pretended like you weren't running at all. And just to be clear, I want to be clear about something so people understand this, because I think I didn't really fully touch on this when I talked to people yesterday. You were running alongside a guy named Richard Fontana, and Richard Fontana doesn't have the name recognition of like a Richard Stallman and whatnot, but
sure, but Richard is, I want to tell people who haven't heard of Richard Fontana before.
Oh my gosh,
one of the most important licensing thinkers. I mean, if I put my top 5 list together, I put
Richard Fontana's on it.
But Richard Fontana's on the top 5 list, no question.
No, absolutely. So again, Richard Fontana was at the Software Freedom Law Center. He was instrumental in GPL v3, AGPL. He was actually on the board of the open source initiative previously. So he was really running again to be on the board of the open source initiative. And you and Richard had some criticisms, and it seemed like the two of you got the boot because of your Chris. That's how it looked to me. It looked petty.
Well, yeah,
Is that
I mean,
is that how it felt to you?
I think the only, as I said, I let you, you said great. I was blushing some of the stuff you said yesterday about me because it was so nice. But I think the one place where I disagreed with what you were saying is I think it is a little more nuanced. I think there are serious problems here, but I'd love to sort of go through the nuance so your viewers can kind of get the idea what happened. So the first thing that you did point out yesterday, which is really important to know, is the elections at the OSI are advisory, and I've never had a problem with that. I actually think it was a very good plan to do it that way. I do, and here's why.
Okay,
because the problem with when you have a lot of an electorate, like there's the United States or something like that, elections work very well as a way to pick leaders because everybody cares, right?
Yeah.
The problem with small nonprofits is, the fact of the matter is, I'm sure your viewers all care about this, but when you think about us versus the population of the world or the US, it's a very small group. And it's hard to run an election and make sure all the ideas are expressed and you have candidates who have all the possible things.
Sure.
So when a board says we want to be self-perpetuating, and I'll be frank, the Software Freedom Conservancy's board is what's called a self-perpetuating board. They decide who to put on, who to take off.
Okay.
The OSI's board is the same way. I thought the OSI had a rather inventive idea to say, look, we can't just make it elected. And I agree with that. I don't know if people know this, they probably don't, that years ago, the OSI board meetings were open to the public. The big annual board meeting happened at OSCON every year.
Yes.
And anybody who was attending OSCON, or even not, just happened to be in town, could just wander in and be you weren't allowed to say anything, but you could be an observer.
You could watch the whole thing.
The early OSI board meetings. I remember it was somewhere in the late 90s, early 2000s. I forget which board member it was, but they were talking about, can we do a membership program where people pay money and then they would get to vote? Sound familiar? And one of the board members said, well, we don't want to do that because what's going to happen is some big time company, they picked a specific example of the day, will come and just pay for all its employees to sign up, and then they're basically in control because they get to elect the board, which is a good point.
I mean that's a very Linux Foundation-y thing. Why have the vote at all if it doesn't matter in the slightest?
But it does, right? And this is where we can get into why the situation is so problematic. The value of the vote, and this is, and I wouldn't say that we had criticisms of the OSI. We were running on a reform platform. We had 4 planks that said, these are things the OSI has lost its way. The OSI is an important organization trying to do things, and they're making mistakes. And we found 4 mistakes. They really concern us, and we're going to run on a reform platform like you would in any election. Like, people are supposed to disagree in elections.
You guys got Bernie Sandered by the Democrats. That's basically what happened here. Because I saw some of the statements.
People have been trying to make these analogies. I think it's hard because
I love an analogy.
Well, the problem with the analogy to broader, national or international politics is that there's weirder effects in these smaller enclaved, there's probably at most 5,000 people in the world who paid attention to what's going on at most, and that's probably being generous.
You're not wrong. That's true. Yeah. It's how many people voted in these elections. It's a couple hundred at most. On
the affiliate side, which is what I was running on, there's only 75 affiliates. There's 75 organizations, roughly. It might be
that get a vote.
That are also open source free software organizations that have signed an affiliate agreement with the OSI, and then Fontana's district. I called them districts. The member district was the people who had given $50 or more in the last year or whatever it was. Right. And so I think it's totally fine to have an advisory election, and it has value because imagine if we knew the real results, which we don't. And imagine if, because we don't even know. For all I know, we both lost anyway. It's unlikely, but we wouldn't know. And so imagine if we had won, both Fontana and I had won, whether or not they seated us was not the only important thing. The important thing was that
it was like a referendum on the direction, sort of a thing.
You got it.
Yeah.
You got it. And that's what's so insidious about what's happened. But if that referendum occurred, no one knows it.
But here's the issue. Here's the issue I have with that And I agree. I agree. The fact that they haven't told us what the votes are, that's bizarre and weird, which suggests to me that you or Richard or both of you won. I mean, that's what it suggests to me. Otherwise, they'd say so.
I mean,
They
yeah,
would have said so.
let me take a tangent on that point. I think logic dictates that, right? Because if we both lost, I think they would be shouting it from the rooftops, because they say, "Hey, the reform candidates lost. Everybody likes the direction." So one of us had to have won.
Right. So I think at least one of you, and honestly, being as you were kind of tied together, you were kind of like co-party of the new Reform Party, or however you want to look at it. I think you both. I think
we call it the Platform for OSI Reform, I believe is what we named it.
That is so. Oh my gosh, totally the Bernie Sanders of this scenario. So
I'm not going to comment on your.
You don't have to. I'll lay the comment out there for you. But. The thing with it almost melts my brain a little bit, because the OSI as it stands right now is clearly in their current trajectory doing, I hate to say doing the bidding of corporations, but doing the bidding of corporations. I mean, like when you look at the open source AI definition as one example, the open source definition, in order to meet the standards of the open source definition, everything about what you're licensing has to be open source. In the open source AI definition, 99.9 into infinity % of what you're releasing can be closed source and proprietary, and it still qualifies as open source.
Yeah, and
it doesn't seem to me like open source advocates and free software purists and all the different groups that you think would make up the OSI, everyone from the likes of you and Eben Moglen and whatnot, all the way over to ESR and everyone else. I don't think any of those people would be like, yeah, that's open source when they look at the open source AI definition. So if the open source initiative is already essentially doing the bidding of the people that pay the bills, then it seems to me like no amount of an advisory vote is going to sway them one way or the other, right? Like, I don't like if 90% of all the people were like, yeah, let's vote for Bradley. You know, I like Brad. And they all vote for Bradley on a reform platform. But then the OSI was like, sorry, we just changed the rules and he submitted his paperwork 2 seconds too late in the time zone that we randomly chose. So he can't be on it anymore. They're not going to suddenly go, but you know what? We're going to listen to all of you anyway and implement the changes he wanted. No, they're not. They're not going to do that.
You've got a point there. I mean, I think a couple of things I want to respond to on what you just said. So first of all, I want to say that, like, I mean, I was very sad for Luke because they missed the moving deadline. I want to be clear that especially after that had happened, I was literally rerunning the date command over and over again to be like, it's not time yet, right? Because I was like, if I'm a minute late, they're going to be a problem. So I was not a minute late. I was half an hour ery, I believe, on submitting my.
Well, that's
even
like, close.
I want to be sure. Well, I didn't. I cut it close because I only had 47 hours, and Fontana and I were on the phone, like debating what to do because it was such a weird request. So why don't we dig down that part of it first? There's so much to talk about.
Let's head that way.
Let's dig down that part. Okay. So that part's at the end of the process, right? We're at the end of this moment where we have been told, and we asked this question, and you talked about this yesterday. We clarified during the orientation meeting. Fontana asked the question, do we have to sign the board agreement now, or is that only if we're seated? And Tracy Hines, the chairperson, said, you only need to sign it if you're seated. And we hadn't published our platform yet when that meeting happened. And after the meeting, Fontana added that item to our platform because we're like, well, we don't want to surprise the OSI. We don't want to surprise the electorate. If we feel that there's these 19 words, poorly drafted 19 words with a good sentiment. You read yesterday, like my alternative proposal for it. And I'm open to all sorts of alternative proposals for it. But as drafted, it is so broad that if I were elected to the OSI board, anything the board had decided going back 20 years we would not be allowed. So I have to go read all the minutes to figure out every position the board took,
Yes.
and then keep in my brain, oh my gosh, I can't say anything that they didn't agree on. Yeah,
I can't imagine you being muzzled like that. Like I just can't imagine it working.
It wouldn't work, A, but also B, that wasn't the intent of the clause. Like, we don't know who drafted it. We've tried to find out. We don't think so. We think the intent of the clause was something like what both Fontana and I have proposed, which is just make sure you don't undermine the OSI's work in your public statements. And I haven't made this point yet, so this is kind of your exclusive here from something I haven't said on my blogs or anything, which is I think the OSI would have been better off if we want appointing us, because all of a sudden, I wouldn't be able to say, under my version of that clause, I wouldn't be able to say the OSIID is a complete disaster. It's a problem. It needs to be repealed. I would have to now say, I'm concerned about the OSIID. I think that we have some problems we have to fix, but I know that the board decided the OSIID was right, and I want to refer you to their statement.
We're using our collaborative process to blah blah
right.
blah.
And I would have to give them deference, because I would have that duty of loyalty to the OSI where I appointed. So I don't understand why they didn't think ahead 2 steps and be like, actually, we should put Bradley on the board, because he won't be able to criticize us as much.
You know what's crazy?
If he's on the board.
What's crazy? They would have done that, then my coverage of this entire thing would be Bradley's gonna just cave and do whatever the corporate cronies want him to do now. And instead, I'm like Bradley, he's fighting the fight, right? They turned you into a martyr essentially for nothing. Like it
really doesn't make a lot of sense.
It doesn't.
And also the thing is that the other point that I think you were correct about is even if Luke had been able to run, if they hadn't tricked them into like the dates or whatever and all that sort of mess, and then changing, you didn't even mention changing the number of seats, I don't think, yesterday in the middle.
I didn't even get into that. There's too many
seats. You didn't get that yesterday, but all this would have played out differently if they hadn't done so many irregularities during the election. But even if even if none of those irregularities had happened, and say Luke, Fontana, and I all get elected, we're still only 3 of 12, right? It's not like we can overturn the OSIID. So it was going to be hard work, but I was signing up for it because, and the reason I ran, and this is also a Lunduke exclusive now, yes. I ran because I really felt I needed to criticize the OSIID. The OSIID is such a problem that I was like, I got to get out there and say something. And I don't like to be that person that gets out there and says, what you're doing is horrible, don't do it, blah, 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 mic, drop the mic and walk away.
Yeah, that's my job, man. You do it different.
I wasn't going to say it, but I'm glad you did. But my job is to try and build consensus, try to make these organizations better. So I said, if I'm going to criticize this thing, I got to be willing to put the work in and say, I'm going to run for the board. And that's the reason I ran, is because I was like, I'm going to criticize OSIID, and that was back in October or something. I said, I'm going to run because I'm going to try to get this changed, even though it's going to be hard work and even though I'll be in a minority.
I mean, that makes sense. It's logical. So what happens now, though? So you're not in. Richard Fontana, in my opinion, if I'm going to make a top 4 or 3 persons who are the kings of open source and free software licensing, you're on the list. The 2 of you are not on there anymore, right? You are not going to be part of the open source initiative in that way. When you look back over the last several years of open source initiative history, they don't allow Eric Raymond's to even exist on their mailing lists anymore, which I know I've been yelled at people because many people think there's a good reason for that. Regardless, person who founded the initiative isn't allowed on their mailing list. They've kicked Bruce Perrins off at least once. It's one thing after another. What do you do when you have an organization that is absolutely opposed to the biggest luminaries in both free software and open source being involved in the organization that's supposed to define open source? What do you do with that? How do you even approach that?
So, I mean, I appreciate your flattery and
No,
your
it's not
compliments.
meant
It's
as a
very nice.
flattery. It's
I know, I get
this
that,
is
but I
this is the
appreciate
place
that you
you're
respect my
stuck,
view.
right? Like
But,
if I see an issue
well,
with this, well, if there's like an issue with software licensing, there's a list of people that I'm going to call and I'm going to complain to and demand that they do something, and you're on that for better or worse. So what do you do?
I appreciate it, but I think it's not about me, because that's just ego. If I'm like, I'm
No,
important, I should be on the board, whatever. What I'm concerned about is not who and am I being dissed? I don't care. You can diss me all you want. And people do it all the time. I'm a free software politician. I'm going to get dissed.
sure.
But what concerns me is the policy move that is actually relatively recent in the OSI. Because before now, sorry, I lost my little earbud there. Before now, we were in a situation where the OSI had problems for sure.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, when something was like, there was a bad license proposed to the OSI, usually the right decision was made. There's a couple cases where it wasn't.
Right.
Those sorts of things. The problem that I think we're facing right now is the OSI has a desire to expand and do more things. And every organization would like to do this. It's a reasonable drive.
Sure.
There's nothing wrong with wanting to do more things, especially if you're passionate about your work and you care. The problem is they are rushing so fast to chase trends, which I think AI is just like, just a lot of it's a fad.
Yeah.
And they're jumping into it to chase it and say, we got it. Well, what are we known for? We're known for definitions. So what do we need to do about AI? We need to write a definition. And the reason that's such flawed planning is because if you look at the history of the open source definition, which I know you have, and your viewers are probably well informed because I've seen you've done videos about the history of the open source definition. But the key thing I pull from that history is it took us as a community probably about 15 years to get from there's the first open source program to we have an open source definition. And there were lots of people trying to figure out what to do. And the big problem with writing a definition is the definition is a race to the bottom. It's the bare minimum of things you have to meet to call it open source. So everybody who wants to be gaming the system is going to push you to make that bar as low as possible. And so one of the great things about the open source definition as drafted is that it was informed by 15 years of debate and history of what does it mean for something to be open source.
All right, I'll buy into that.
Great example. You look at the earliest conversations in the late 1980s and early 1990s, people were seriously taking the position that commercial use, making money with then free software or open source. I'm not big about what you call it, unlike some others.
Yeah.
But people are debating like is it wrong? Is it not free software if somebody sells it, if somebody makes money off of it?
Yeah.
And it took our community a number of years to decide, no, it's really important that the software doesn't discriminate between commercial activity and non-commercial. They should be equal. And
it's funny.
And we finally figured that out. But imagine if we had written an open source definition in 1989 and said a non-commercial use only. Which could have happened.
You're right. I mean, it did take years for that to happen. I remember doing a show with Stallman many 15 some odd years ago where he and I were both making the case publicly that commercial use is awesome. You just have to still be free software, but make money, tons of money. Money's awesome. Yep. And people were literally writing in by droves to criticize Richard Stallman's stance that you can make money from free software. It was amazing to me.
And it's one of the great things. There's a little bit of tangent, but I think it's worth pointing out. And this is one of the things that's great about free and open source software is that it doesn't cut through the political spectrum the way that most issues do. Like FOSS is compatible with capitalism. FOSS is compatible with socialism. Like it's a different kind of thing that extends beyond the usual political buckets.
All right, I'm gonna let's put a pin in that one and move to the side because I don't think it's compatible with socialism at all. But we'll move to the side.
Well,
but yes,
we'll put that. Well, we agreed we were going to try to avoid topics we disagree on. So I'm going to stick with that. You're right. But back to the OSI thing. I think that the OSAID is this problem of rushing a definition out when we don't even understand as a culture, as a community, like how is this stuff going to play out? What's it going to be like?
Right.
There are open questions. We are in like the 1987 of open source with open source AI, and we shouldn't be just
Fair.
rushing to define it. And one of the most disturbing things that happened during the OSAID process was that Executive Director Stefano Mafuli took the position that, quote, there is no point in publishing a definition where no existing system can meet the definition.
Right.
And I disagree with that completely.
I do
Absolutely.
as well.
because the problem is you're only looking at what is, not what could be. And the goal of a philosophical organization about open source is to figure out what could be and how to make it happen.
Right. Or what it should be. Right. What
Yeah,
should
could
the
be.
definition?
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
I get that. I'm on board with all that. My serious question comes back to what the heck now? Like really?
Well,
like what
yeah,
happens?
you asked that before, and I didn't really get to it. So yeah,
No, it's fine. You can dodge my questions all you
No,
like.
I'm not
Bradley
dodging that
Kuhn.
question. I just you have this thing where you ask like 4 questions in a row,
I
like
know.
all
It
at
breaks
once,
your
and I'm
brain.
like, I gotta pick
It's-
which
I
one
know.
I'm gonna answer.
That's my job. I'm good at it. So
Well, do one. I'll do one at a time. Might work better. Put a pin in that.
okay.
and
So what do we
consider it
do
for the
now?
future.
What
do we
does
do now?
what does
I think
Bradley
the
Kuhn
most
do now?
important thing that I'd like to see happen,
Yeah.
and I'm going to be working on this in the coming week, is I think we need to put some pressure on the OSI to just publish the real election results. Publish anonymized ballots.
Yeah.
That's one way to do it. So people can run their own STV calculation, or at the very least, publish the STV run before you modified the ballot.
And just so everyone
and
is aware, basically the way they did the election was kind of a ranked choice. What is it? The Scottish.
Yeah, it was they
thing.
used the Scottish STV algorithm. It's a form, like ranked choice voting is like a big area, and then there's different ways you could do ranked choice, and Scottish STV is one way to do ranked choice.
Right. So they did a ranked choice, but it does appear like, based on the graphs that they published, that they went and they modified all the ballots to remove the names and then ran the results. But I don't even know if you can say that definitively, because they haven't provided any details.
Right. Well, there's 2 things they could have done to get those results. One is they could have tampered with all the ballots, or whatever STV implementation, because I mean it's just software, right? Whatever STV implementation might have an option to do what if scenarios, like what if these candidates were disqualified?
I gotcha.
Run it, and then they say, -- exclude Kuhn, -- exclude Fontana, and then they get those results. So it could be that.
Okay, so you push, you and Richard Fontana and anyone else can push to try to get them to release those numbers. What happens if they don't?
I don't know. I mean, this has been a very complicated political thing to do, because I didn't expect the OSI to be this aggressive and this this evasive in what they've done. So I didn't plan. I'm a politician, right? A free software politician. I plan ahead. Like I have a big giant decision tree in my head of like, if they do this, then we'll have to this, blah blah blah, right? But I'm in a point in the decision tree where I would never have imagined they would be this disingenuous. Like it really surprises me that they went this far. So I don't know what happens. I think that the OSI was teetering on the edge of serious credibility loss. And I think the OSAID well, I think the OSAID,
I don't mean to laugh, but teetering is where they were a couple years ago.
Okay, I mean, we can disagree about how rapid it's moving,
I know.
but I think that they definitely are regularly losing credibility for behavior that they've done, like the OSAID, and I think that they look to me like they're in this weird situation of circling wagons around the OSAID, and oh my gosh, we have to pretend there is no criticism of OSAID because we got to get consensus for it, and we've got to exclude people who criticize the OSAID. And I think it's just bad consensus building. They do much better to bring us in and say, like, well, why is it that you want to like roll back the OSAID to recommendations? What would that mean? How should we do it if we do it? Those kind of conversations are the ones I was looking forward to having on the board.
Yeah, I sat in on some of the OSAID meetings that they held, and to Stefan, the executive director's credit, he called on me every time because I had questions. And he never answered the questions fully, but he at least let me ask them. So I thought that was good. That was better than some would do. But what amazed me with the whole OSAID process is it was not driven by software licensing folks, open source folks, free software folks. They hired regardless of whether you like them or not, a political activist consulting firm that only did political activism. And you may love their politics, but they weren't they weren't nerds, not really. And they certainly weren't open source or free software nerds. And so inevitably the result was going to be more of a politically driven result, or more of a result that was driven by whoever was paying the bills for the consulting firm. And to me, that just was a recipe for disaster. You could see the writing on the wall from the very first iteration of the OSAID. You could see they were going to be cool with it being mostly closed source, and they were never going to change no matter how many prominent leaders spoke up. You could see it happening. Just like when you and Richard Fontana, you posted your platforms over on the open source initiative forum, and you had your blog posts and you had your criticisms of your specific changes, reforms for the open source initiative. And you could see it right there. Instantly, you knew they were gonna Bernie Sanders you. You could see it. Like, I know you were disappointed by how that went, but you could see that was the route they were gonna go. Like, there was. I don't think there was ever a chance.
Maybe I played this too politically naive. I really thought, because there are people that I've worked with for decades on different sides of the coin. I mean, sure. Justin Colanino is a great example. He used to do legal work for the Software Freedom Conservancy. Yep. Now he works for Microsoft. He's on the other side of the issue a lot when we're arguing with Microsoft about something. But I known him professionally for many years. There's lots of people on that board that I really felt would. I'm really disappointed in them, because I felt that they're the kind of people that would not have stood for something like this, because I think they were. I thought, I guess 2 weeks ago, I thought they were people who understood that dissent and the ability to respectfully disagree about issues and come to a new consensus when there's clearly something's gone wrong. I thought they would be okay with it. And I actually, I'll be real. I'm not like post hoc justifying this. I really thought through the whole thing. My biggest worry was not that they would do this. My biggest worry was I was going to have to spend 2 years on the OSI board in a very clear minority, like constantly raising. And the thing is, when you join a board of directors, you have obligations. You have a duty of care. You have a duty of loyalty. You have fiduciary duty, and you must meet those. So I'm thinking, like, I'm going to come to every meeting. I'm going to like move that we reopen the OSAID.
And you're going to be shot down every time.
Get voted down. And then we have to do the mundane work of a board, which I then have to dig into, like reading the Form 990 and making sure it's correct and looking over the financials.
Even though the organization's not moving the way you want it to go.
And I would be obligated to do all that just so at the next meeting I could come in and make my motion again, right? And so that was my biggest worry, was like, I'm going to have to like work hard, and I might not be able to accomplish anything while working hard. And I've got lots of other free and open source software work I'd like to be doing, but I thought, well, this is worth it because it's important, but it's going to take a lot of my time. So that was my only worry coming in, was like, time, like, how do I budget the time for this? I had no idea they were going to do this.
They were so clearly going to do this.
I think of myself as a pretty cynical person, but apparently you're more cynical.
My cynicism is through the roof, my friend. So here's the thing. So I like you, I know a lot of these people. I have no issues with a lot of these people. We have broken bread with half the board. You know what I mean? We're good. But over the last several years, this sort of strategy seems to be increasing throughout open source land. You put the left, right, up, down politics aside. It's just a strategy that seems to be reoccurring of grasping onto control a tighter and tighter fashion, and becoming less and less open and transparent in the process. Like, and I think I mentioned this yesterday or when I was talking to you. It reminds me, like, when the Linux Foundation used to have community board member seats, right? They used to have two seats that, and you know this very well, where the Linux Foundation members, the community, the people who give $40 or whatever, right? They can all run and have a say in what the Linux Foundation does. Now, it was just 2 seats compared to like 1,000 seats that Microsoft and VMware and Oracle and everyone else get.
Again, I think it was only 12 seats.
Okay, 12, 1,000. It didn't matter because it was only 2 member seats, right?
Huge minority for the members. Yeah.
But at least the members could be there, could be part of it, could report on how it was going. It was like that. And then one of your colleagues, Karen Sandler, came along and said, I'm going to run for the Linux Foundation board. And at the time, the Software Free, and I'm not telling you anything new, but the Software Freedom Conservancy was involved with legal action regarding VMware and GPL compliance. That was obviously a no-no because VMware was a very big paying member of the Linux Foundation, was already on the board. And mysteriously, right after Karen Sandler says, hey, I'll run, Jim Zemlin, the head of the Linux Foundation, came out and said, you know what? We don't need those community seats anymore. We're just not going to have those at all. We're not going to have anything. There's no elections whatsoever. Never mind.
This is how afraid they were of Karen. I mean, it's actually flattering to Karen that they were so afraid of the idea that Karen would win a seat.
Yeah.
She announced in the morning that she was running. They had a board meeting that afternoon.
Yep.
To remove the seats. Like, we later found that out. Like, we dug into like when was the actual vote and so forth. Because I'm a geek like you about this. So, like,
I got
when
a
exactly
call
did
about
that
it.
happen versus this? And it was that afternoon after she announced.
I got a call about it right before the meeting from someone who will not be named at one of those companies who was involved, saying, oh man, we're gonna do this. And I was doing a different podcast at the time, and they're like, you're gonna cover this, but you're not hearing it from me, sort of a thing. Yeah. I mean, everyone knew this was going on. And so we saw that the Linux Foundation. And now I know Karen Sandler's currently on the board of directors for GNOME now, but GNOME has having similar things, right? They kick people off their board and not told anyone about it. They're doing all sorts of bizarre things. And it's almost every the NixOS Foundation did similar things. They even kicked out their founder. And on and on and on, and I'm seeing these groups that are just grabbing, and they're like, I'm gonna take you over, and I'm not gonna let anyone else in if we disagree with them. And I see, as soon as I see you speak up, I'm like, they're gonna whack that mole. You were the mole that popped up, and they whacked you. They don't allow the moles to pop up.
So I think it's. I mean, you're dragging us to the territory we disagree. I think it's you got to look at each of these situations separately because they're very, very different circumstances. Yeah. I think Linux Foundation, as an example, I mean, that's a 501c6. That's a trade association.
This is true. That's true.
So they are very corporate controlled, and it is, it was wonderful that they used to have member seats. It was horrible that they eliminated them. But it's sort of like
they're a trade like that foundation, yeah.
Trade associations are gonna trade associate, right? And so they're
that's true. What else are they eventually gonna do?
Hear from the people, they want to hear from the companies. OSI is a bit different and is a little more upsetting because they're like Software Freedom Conservancy. They're a 501c3. Which is a charitable organization designed to represent a mission, which you file with the IRS on a thing called the Form 1023. Sorry for the IRS geekiness, but there's a process to get tax exempt because 501c3 is like the best type of tax exempt you can get. Not only are you tax exempt, but your donors get a tax deduction.
Right.
So it's a big deal. It's it's got to be done right, and it is concerning to me, it's specifically about the OSIID process that when Stefano said that thing about an existing model has to fit it, I was like, well, but there aren't really any like volunteer groups putting together models because it's hard for a volunteer group to do that for 100 reasons. So you're talking about some company's model. So you're basically picking a company and saying, we choose you. Your model is what makes, and they didn't choose Zuckerberg,
and this
right?
is one reason of many they would never let you onto their board. Never. Not in a million years. They wouldn't let you on. They wouldn't let Richard Fontana. It doesn't matter. They're not going to allow that. I mean, they wouldn't let Eric Raymond on at this point. They wouldn't let Bruce Perens on at this point. No way.
Right. And that part I don't mind because it's not about the individuals. It's not about.
No,
I know you keep saying luminaries, but I think the concern is not who did or who didn't get on. I mean, I'm a little personally concerned about that because I'm different.
I'm not.
But
good.
But the point I really want to drive home here for your viewers to know is that the problems are the policy. The problems is that the policy is rapidly getting worse, and the fact that we can't get people on the board, it doesn't matter who or who not. It matters that there's nobody getting on the board, whoever it is, that is going to stop the train or even try to stop the train of running into these policies that are basically giving the definition away to for-profit companies.
It's fundamental change in what the overall obvious mission of the organization is. The reason I bring up you and so many of these other legends it not being allowed is because you're not disallowed because of your adorable shaven head. And Eric Raymond is not disallowed because he likes guns a little bit more than someone else does. The reason all of you guys aren't allowed is because you represent some of the older way of thinking, right? Some of the way of thinking that would have been compatible with the open source initiative 10 or 15 years ago. Right? 10 or 15 years ago, you being on the board, Richard Fontana was on the board, like that actually would have made tremendous sense. Like it would have been very logical. One or two people might have disagreed with something, but overall, everyone would have been pretty much heading in the same direction. But now the OSI is heading east, and all of the open source licensing people that have done all the work in the past are still heading west. They've been heading west for 30 years and they keep heading west, but the OSI wants to head east. They're not going to bring you on because you're heading in the direction they don't want to head. It's a fundamental change in strategy. And
to be clear, I would be flabbergasted if I was seated at this point. So I agree with you. They're not going to let me on. They're not going to let Fontana on. I hope we get the relatively Pyrrhic victory of getting the true election results. And it's just the right thing to do. I think the OSI hurts themselves even more if they never release the election results, because I think if they release the election results, I would of course I'd make a few blog posts and say, look at this, I actually won. They chose not to seat me. That was a bad idea, and I'll probably move on. If they're not going to release the election results, like this is going to be in every one of my talks now. That they basically would not even report the fact, which is. You put it reasonably well that we had two candidates who wanted to go west. We still want to go east, so we're not appointing them.
They just won't.
And the honorable thing to do is to say that, right? You have the legal power to do that.
This is not the direction we want to head.
Their bylaws say clearly that this election's advisory.
Yes.
So
it doesn't
they
matter.
can just say, we decided not to take your advice, but the electorate has a right to know that. That they are not taking the advice of the electorate.
That is right.
That needs to be solved. And if they're not going to solve it, I think that there has to be sort of constant pressure on them that they are not operating transparently. They're not operating by their own rules at that point.
Well, here's the thing. And even if they don't solve it, we're kind of at a point where the relevance of the open source initiative is going to take a nosedive into the trash bin. I mean, because they don't have the trademark on the term. They wanted the trademark on the term. They've threatened people legally to get the trademark, and they're never going to get it. And
by the way, Brian, I mean, like I said, we disagree on a lot of stuff, but you're one of the few people who has pointed that out. About this issue of the open source being a generic term. The funny part is even if they had worked hard, because they kind of like gave up on the trademark pretty easy.
Screwed that one up,
But even if they had tried hard, they probably wouldn't have gotten it, because as a journalist, open source was a term about journalism. Like an open source was something that you didn't.
Yeah, there was open source intelligence, all sorts of things.
Yeah, so it was a generic term before they started. So it was unlikely they were going to get the trademark anyway. But they.
Caldera had it 2 years earlier.
but you're totally right that the only way they can succeed in being able to say we are the authorities on what is and is not open source is by community consensus,
by consent,
and by credibility. And
exactly.
This election, the way they handled it, showed they're not very good at community consensus.
They're closed,
and they're losing their credibility.
So yes, exactly. They operate in a closed, non-transparent manner, and so why would you put your faith in them to help bless licenses for being open when they themselves aren't open? I think it's a fair criticism, and I would like to touch on a topic just to pivot just ever so slightly. They asked you to sign a document with a closed source piece of software. Now, I have no issue with people liking closed source software or using closed source software. I use a little bit here and there myself. I know you're a little bit more of a free software purist than I am, but I think in general, I have no issue with that. I do find it strange, though, that they have a firm requirement that if you are leading the open source initiative, you must use closed source software. What in the heckatarnations? That to me is like, oh, you can be on the board of directors of Coke, but you must drink Pepsi. Like, I don't understand the logic there.
I know you love analogies. I have a better analogy. That's
give me a better one.
A for-profit company. Imagine the Friends of Trees. I mean, they planted the trees out in my front yard. You call them up, you pay them a certain amount of money. You want a tree, they come plant it. They visit like every so often to make sure the tree survives. Right? It's a good organization.
Trees are
do
cool.
Good things. But imagine, and they're a 501c3, just like OSI. Imagine if you were running for the board of the Friends of Trees, and they said, well, if you're going to join the board, we print all of the board materials on brand new paper just from cut down trees 5 minutes ago. It just looks better. It's easier to read. And so, you're going to have to agree to get your board materials. And then somebody comes along and runs on a platform and says, you know what? I'm okay. I'm not going to fight you about that. If you all like these, like tree cutting down paper stuff, I just want my board materials. When you give them to me, please find the most 100% post-consumer recycled paper. Right. And I ran on that platform and they said, no, you cannot be a director if you are not willing to get your board materials on trees we just cut down yesterday.
I gotta say, that is a great analogy and comparison there. I do find it funny that the right wing wacko here went with soda, and the left wing dude went with recycled paper and trees.
Well,
we were holding true to our brands, and I gotta.
Well, I mainly wanted to talk about another charity because that's what's so
I'm
weird.
with you.
Because people who serve on boards of charities, you don't get paid. Usually, occasionally.
Hey, I like to donate my money to the CEO of Coca-Cola, man. I mean, he needs
you
it.
probably do every time you buy a Coke. But
I love my Coke. Okay.
But I think it's important. So back on the proprietary, not with the analogies, but back on the proprietary software stuff. So I mean that it was truly bizarre that we were told that. It was, the DocuSign thing was kind of a red herring that came in later. We were told during the board orientation very clearly. They said we use all Google products. We're 100% Google Shop.
Yeah, they are.
Google Docs.
Google Docs for Gmail, everything.
If you become, and this was the part that bothered me the most, if you become a board member of the OSI, they will not edit Etsy aliases and point, if I were to be elected, bkuhn:/bkuhn@eb.org. You must create a Google account.
Yeah, you have to.
And I don't have one. You'd have to create a Google account in your own name and agree to Google's terms of service in your own name so that they can link the open source Google, opensource.org Google.
I can see this giving you a hernia, and that's just very entertaining to me.
It makes no sense.
It makes no sense.
Etsy aliases. How long has Etsy aliases existed?
I know.
Come on.
But how? And you see this happening all the time. Like Mozilla. Mozilla does all their work using Google Docs and Google Workspaces. They don't use open source at Mozilla hardly at all. They almost run everything on Windows and Macs and Google services. The open source initiative, it's kind of the same way, right? It's all Google services.
And this is something that the corporate world knows about too. I don't love this phrase because I have two dogs. You might have heard them barking earlier. So I really love dogs. So I don't like the term dog fooding because it makes it sound like dog fooding is bad, and my dogs really like their dog food.
On.
But
Dog fooding is a totally
I
fine term.
so much.
Don't.
Okay, it's fine. You're right. It's not that bad.
Okay,
I love
you
dogs
go
so
eat
much.
your dog food for a week.
Yeah. Well, and that stuff smelled, man. My one dog, he's on this like
See?
senior stuff,
Uh-huh.
and I try to get my spouse to do it because I'm like, I open that can, and I literally, this will be funny for like a funny, like I literally it smells like vomit, and I don't want to smell that like right in the morning.
See, eat
yeah,
your
so
own dog food. It
I
applies.
agree, dog
We're
food does
sticking
not
with
smell
it.
good.
You can't
So
take this
maybe
away
the
from me
term's just fine.
with your friendly naming initiatives. No doing that, Bradley.
All right, fine. So we'll say dog fooding. Okay.
Okay.
But this idea of using stuff that you're trying to promote, like that, everybody tries to do that because it's essential.
Yeah.
It's essential even if you're in a proprietary software world, you want to use your own software to make
Right.
sure it works.
So I'm in the Windows team.
If
I
you're in
don't
the
run
open
Linux.
source world, why wouldn't you be using like all the open source tools, which there are? How many open source tools are there for email? I mean, come on. There's thousands.
Seriously. And if they need something that's Google Docs-ish, I don't know, Nextcloud or something, like there's plenty of options.
Etherpad is great. I use Etherpad all the time.
Bingo.
I don't know if it's on your shit list or not, but I think it's great. And
there's plenty of options.
Etherpad, like it's just as good as
and
Google
even
Docs.
if it's not,
a little less polished, but so what?
Even if it's not, when I saw that they were like, you gotta sign the document using proprietary software in order to agree to be part of the board, and they did that a couple of days after they did the UN UN policy on open source, where you can only join it.
Endorsed UN thing, yeah.
If you use Microsoft 365. I was like, okay, come on. You guys aren't even trying right now. Either that or you're literally punking us, because this is make fun of them.
I think what's happened is this is where there's a little kernel of truth in your luminaries argument. I think a lot of people who have come through the OSI board came to open source through being a lawyer for a company who was unsure about open source, right? And lawyers, the reason lawyers love open source is because we invented, as a community, mostly geeks and hackers, invented like a new area of law. And law is freaking boring. Like most stuff in legal stuff is like tax law. I mean, my goodness, it's boring.
It's boring.
And so lawyers have gotten so excited about open source and free software licensing because it's new, it's novel, it's cool, it does interesting things. And so a lot of the OSI board has cycled through, and McCoy Smith is a great example. I mean, McCoy Smith was a lawyer for Intel for like 30 years or something, and now he runs his own boutique law firm, mostly, by the way, defending people who violate the GPL, just to point out. And so it's like yes, he's very knowledgeable about licensing, but he's not somebody who wants to see everybody switching to open source tomorrow. He's probably like has no opinion on that. He's more about the interesting legal aspects.
He understands the law.
Yeah. And I think it's that's been a big problem that OSI has, is that its main task, which is understanding licensing and figuring out whether a license does or does not meet the OSD, that work is very suited to lawyers, but there are very few lawyers who are also tried and true free software, open source people who understand like what writing software is, why it's important to have the source code. The lawyers just haven't lived in that world. So even if they're sympathetic to it, they don't see the problem of that we see is obvious. Like, why would open source initiative use all Google products?
See, this is why I bring up the legends and luminaries thing, because people who have lived in it, have advocated for it, and are well studied and researched on it are limited. I mean, it's a limited number of people, especially when you start talking about the limited number of people who haven't kind of flamed out. I'm sure you and I can think of one or two examples where they've kind of flamed out, and so they're off to the side now. There's only really a couple left, and I don't need really old aging dudes like us running things forever. I don't need that. But since the strategy of these organizations, from the OSI to so many other open source groups, is fundamentally changing over the last several years and changing direction so dramatically, to see them make a point of changing rules after the fact just so they don't have to tell people how popular all you old fogies are, to me, that it kind of just drives the final nail into the coffin for me. Like, the reason I cover the OSI is I want to see the OSI succeed. I want to see organizations like the OSI succeed. And I don't see that happening. It's sort of like with Mozilla. I cover Mozilla a lot, and I know I mispronounce it. Mozilla. It's Mozzarella Godzilla, Mozilla. And I want to see them succeed. But really what I want to see what they used to be succeed. I want to see what the OSI used to be succeed. And they've all so fundamentally changed that it's sad to see the standard bearers of open source or free software or Creative Commons just aren't what they once were. And that is a major bummer for me. I look at that and I don't see a way to fix these organizations without gutting these organizations. And I don't see a way to gut these organizations because they grasp onto power with their iron claws and they don't let go. They would never let you in. Like, you have the Software Freedom Conservancy, but you can do what you can from there. But within the other organizations, they're not going to let you in.
Yeah, I mean that's certainly true, and I the last thing you said is true. I think you're overstating the power issue.
I overstate everything.
Sure. Yeah. So I will go on record saying Brian overstated everything and everything he said today, just in case I missed a few earlier. But I think I like with everything you say, you're I mean, that's your brand, and that's fine. But there a lot of the stuff you say, there's a kernel of truth there, and I think the kernel of truth in what you just said is that we're in a tough time for open source, a really, really tough moment. I just saw somebody, I was at Scale, Southern California Linux Expo a couple of weeks ago, and I saw somebody I hadn't seen in years who works in, he works for one of these consulting open source company kind of things. But he was a big fan of my work early on when he was in school. And he came up to me and he said, I remember 10 years ago, I've been waiting to see you because 10 years ago, you gave a talk and you said we're about to enter the dark ages of FOSS. And we're in the dark ages of FOSS, aren't we? And I was like, I forgot I'd said that, but yes, indeed we are. And I think the main problem is big tech and their interest. They discovered the tools that we used, right? That, Git as a great example, but all of them, all the way we develop software is obviously a better way to develop software. I mean, that was the earliest points a lot of open source activists make. It works better, and it gets it done faster, and it's more rewarding for people in their careers. And so the companies have adopted the methods of developing open source software for developing proprietary software. There's this whole movement called inner source that you might have heard of. And what inner source is
I've literally got friends who used to be open source fanatics who are now inner source consultants.
Right.
Yeah.
So just to explain it for your viewers who might not be familiar with the term, this is basically taking open source development methodologies and principles, bringing them into very large companies and rolling them out, like rolling out a big shared repository system where everybody in the company can see each other's repositories. All of it's proprietary. None of it gets released as public to the open source world, out in the public. No. But everybody in the company can see it, and they're all using Git, and they're sending patches on mailing lists, internal mailing lists, of course. They're learning how to do development our way inside their big siloed company, and it's great for them. They get software done so much better. Yeah. But that's not what we were trying to do. We were trying to create cross-company, hobbyist and professional working together, lots of people to contribute and be involved in that. And we developed the tools to do that because we needed them, because we were the first people in open source and free software to say, how do I actually collaborate? I'm sitting here in the US. How do I collaborate with somebody in Japan? How do I do that exactly? And we had to figure that out. I remember going to a talk at Usenix. Sorry, I know you love like old school stories, so I'm going to tell this one real quick. I remember going to a talk in Usenix right after, it was like 1997, after the FreeBSD project had started.
Yeah.
After the lawsuit and everything.
Yeah.
And the entire panel, a bunch of FreeBSD developers, were trying to figure out like how to ship patches to each other. That's all it was about. It was like, well, like he's doing this in Japan, I'm doing this here, and like if he emails the patch and then I put it in, and then like because they were still using RCS, right? So they're like, and I put it in mine, and then blah blah blah. Like, and CVS hadn't even been invented yet.
Nope.
So they're like they're just trying to figure it out. That was 35 years of work of us trying to figure out how do you do development in a distributed way.
I mean,
and we solved that problem. We had to, because out of necessity, and now companies have taken that and they say they're all into open source. What they're into is open source cafeteria style. They're like, we'll have one of those, but we're not going to do that one over there. And so they're willing to consume all this open source, learn from us, but they have to be pushed to give code back. Like they're not just going to give code back out of the goodness of their hearts.
And now all those big tech companies that have learned how to do that have put huge dollars into either buying or investing or buying seats on almost every major open source company or organization. Embrace, extend, I don't remember what comes after that. It just seems like I mean, we've been talking about it. I mean, you've been talking about it for years, so have I. And I are all the people listening at home, they're like nodding along, like, yep, this is how it's going. And yeah, we kind of are in a bit of a weird spot in open source and free software where you're right. We've got 35 plus years of figuring things out. Things are working real smooth. Technologically, everything's coming together, and everything's falling in on itself, and that building's on fire, and that over there is Mecha Godzilla, and it's coming to destroy us. So all those things are happening at the same time, and it's just kind of chaos. And I don't know.
Difficult. I wouldn't say it's chaos. Again, you're overstating. Of course, as I said, Brian overstates everything. I mean, but it's a huge. It's like it is the conundrum of my career, right? I mean, I look at this being I get my age in hex, so I don't sound so old. I'm OX 34 now. So I'm getting up there.
Nerd.
and 52. And so but I'm like at this moment in my career, like I'm like late career now, and I'm thinking, man, like a lot of stuff that was obvious before, and nobody would have disagreed about. Like, for example, the open source initiative runs on open source software. Yeah, like that's in question now, and people who say, no, it's a bad idea, are being told, what, you're just so unreasonable, which is literally what board members were saying about us.
And that you're not allowed. You're not allowed.
Yeah, not even allowed to make our own choices.
I guarantee you, you are this close from being banned from mailing lists related to open source. I guarantee you.
You are overstating again.
You would have said, we would have had this conversation 2 months ago, and I said, man, they're going to hide the election results, they're going to rig it, and they're going to change the rules last minute to kick as many of you rabble rousers out as possible. You'd have said I was overstating it. But here's the thing about my crazy overstatements. I'm usually right. So I'm just saying,
I don't know about
they have a track record of doing this.
All right. Well,
Eric Raymond, for all of his faults, is still not allowed on their mailing list. So
anyway, I could be cruel and use it. Well, stop clock is right twice a day. But
see, I speak all day long, so I'm right all the time.
I don't think the logic.
I just have to say, if I say 10,000 words a day, oh my gosh, the accuracy's flowing out.
Five of them are going to be right for sure.
Okay.
But seriously, I mean, not just looking at the OSI thing. I know we're probably running out of time, but if you look at things like the GitHub situation, where we have had the argument in the community of, should you use 100% open source tools to develop your open source software?
Right.
We've had that argument at least 3 times, and we keep. Every generation, we have to have that argument again, where we finally come to the conclusion, like, you know what? It's a big mistake to develop your open source software with proprietary tools. And then we figure that out, and then we have like 5 good years, and then some new proprietary tool comes around, we have to do it all over again.
And those of us who have been doing this since the 90s are going, oh my heavens, we're having this conversation again. Yeah. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills, like the black cat has walked in front of me at least 20 times by now. I mean, come on. Heavens to Betsy.
And it's really tough, but I think the most important thing for me that I'm focused on is things look pretty bad right now for open source and free software. However, it was never going to be a one generation deal. When I got started, I actually, this is how naive, you want to hear how naive I was when I started?
I sure do.
I thought that in my lifetime, there would be no more proprietary software. When I was 26,
You did
27,
not. You really thought that?
I was 26. 26-year-olds don't know anything, right?
That's
Come
true.
on.
I was pretty stupid in my 20s.
That's probably my most dangerous statement I said on the show. I just said that.
Nah, 26-year-olds are retarded, man.
But I shouldn't speak for everyone. I can only speak for myself. When I was 26, I really didn't know what was going on.
And I just want to make it clear for those of you who are going to quote this show later on, I was the one who said 26-year-olds are retarded. I want to be very, very clear that Bradley Kuhn did not use the word retarded.
I would never use that word to refer to anyone, and I think it's not a great word to
use. But Brian Lunduke,
this is one of the many places where we disagree.
At least 7 or 8 times now. In fact, he's going to say it again, retarded.
I have never said it. What I was speaking is just from my own experience.
Yes.
When I was 26, I was naive and a little clueless, and I really thought
I was retarded.
Brian, don't make me have to hang up. I have to keep saying, I have to say it every time that word is not appropriate, right? I mean, I gotta have to say it every time. So we're just gonna end up in like this infinite loop.
Continue. I promise not to say retarded again.
Okay, thank you. So I think that when I was young, I really thought that this will be that 30, 40 years we'll have all open source everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And I got Clue later and realized that wasn't going to be the case. And once I realized in my early 30s, oh shoot, we're not going to solve this in my lifetime. I really started to think like this is a multi-generational effort. My job, I see it now as I get into my OX3s, is to make sure there's another generation of people who care about this stuff the way that we all did in the early days, and really show people. And this is one of the reasons why I've focused a lot of my work with my colleague Denver Gingerich in recent years on the question of right to repair, because we have natural allies and people who want to repair hardware. And well, now that almost every device has at least some software in it, repairing your software is just as important as being able to repair your hardware. Yeah. And what kind of software can be repaired? Open source software.
Oh my heavens. Oh my heavens. So yeah, I mean, we do see the Open Source Hardware Association, the Louis Rossmans of the world and whatnot, people pushing forward on the repairable hardware. It really is. It's kind of the same thing.
But if you have repairable hardware that has proprietary software where the vendor literally turns off updates after a while, and you turn what was a perfectly usable piece of equipment into a brick merely because the vendor went out of business or stopped supporting, like you put your free and open source software on there and you keep running. The laptop I'm talking to you on is, I think, like 18 years old, right? It's
Are you using a ThinkPad?
I am indeed using a T500, and it's my dedicated video chat machine, but it still works great for that. It's positioned right where I need it, and I have another computer over here, and this is my video chat, and so like the fact that free and open source software lets you use the hardware you want for as long as you want, that is something that I think will inspire the next generation, because people are really getting sick of their favorite device not working anymore, of just being bombarded with ads and everything they use, which you can only do with proprietary software, because if it's open source, you just patch the ads out, right?
Get it out. Man, if only the open source initiative felt the same way. Is there anything we've been talking for over now? This has been great. Bradley, I want to commend you just a little bit. I want to commend you for trying to fight the fight that you were fighting with the OSI, and for having the cojones to come on this show to talk about it. Again, you and I disagree on so many things, but a tremendous amount of respect for what you do. Please keep doing it. There needs to be people like you doing it, especially with so many individuals have kind of gone off to the side, that the big noise makers of years past are no longer out there making noise for a variety of reasons. We need We need totally bald-headed people like you to get out there and really do this. Is there anything you want people to know before we head off into the sunset?
Well, I mean, I think I got to say it, Brian. As I've said a few times, I think you exaggerate a lot of things. I disagree with you about a lot of stuff.
You sure do.
I do, and
Hippie.
I think that the word the inappropriate word you were using before is inappropriate, and I would urge you to
A
pick a
lot of
different
people
word.
are hippies. Don't badmouth hippies.
Okay, well, anyway, I want to state that for the record.
Stated.
I think that I
Understood.
think
Yeah,
yeah,
I get it.
I think that I want to reiterate what I said at the very beginning, which is I think people should put time in to talk to people that they disagree with,
Yeah.
because there is value in dialogue, like we've just had,
Yes.
between people who disagree. And there are a couple of things we find we agree on. We both think that the OSI has lost its way and needs some help.
Yes. Honestly, even people like us who probably have not voted for the same thing or candidate in the last 30 years, even once, we probably still agree on more things than we disagree on. And so,
Yeah, I mean, and we live in a community together, and I think
yes.
people have to be willing to talk to each other. So I hope those people who are going to be emailing me angry that I came on your show, I hope they will see that like, yeah, and it's nice to be here to correct you, because you shouldn't have used that word, and I'm glad I'm here to tell you you shouldn't have used that word.
See,
And you can disagree with me.
This is what
but you
I
shouldn't
keep
use that
telling
word.
people. Like I reached out to a good friend of mine who, again, politically, he and I totally different, but he's a prominent member of a runner of a very large open source project, and he was making some news. And I said, "Hey, do you want to come talk about this?" And he's like, "Oh no, my community hates everything that you say." I'm like, "Perfect. Come disagree with me and tell me how dumb I am." I won't use that extra word I used earlier, but tell me how not very smart I am. And just tell me, and I'll let you can talk about it for 3 hours of how dumb I am. That's totally fine.
I think the only thing I really misstated was I didn't know what I was doing when I was 26. I'm sure there are many 26-year-olds who were much better than I was when I was 26. So I should clarify that too, for myself, because for all I know, I might get a lot of emails from 26-year-olds saying that they felt I discredited them. But all I know is my own experience, and
now,
boy, I didn't know anything.
Who's exaggerating now? I will be on the record. 26-year-olds are all dumb. Every single one of them. That's all there is.
I mean, there is science behind this, right? Because that your brain doesn't fully form until like 27, 28.
It's totally true. Your brains do fundamentally change. Like there's stages of life where your brains changes. Having kids changes your brain. Your age changes your brain. Like so many different things changes the actual structure. Anyway.
Oh yeah, I know the age changed your brain. Like I am often sad that I'm not as sharp as I used to be. It's tough, and I can't like focus as much as I used to. So yeah, definitely age stuff definitely changed your brain. I mean, I'm getting to be a dinosaur now. So yeah.
Isn't it fantastic? I love it.
Well, I've actually liked we're really going on now and off topic, but I've liked every age that I've been, for sure. I always was. Once I was 18, I hated being like a teenager with no rights. But once I was 18, I had rights in society. I've liked every age since I was 18.
Can I tell you, I like being whatever age I am now, right now, more than what I used to be. Like
that's from 18 on.
Other than the whole "I slept wrong last night, so now my whole body hurts" thing. Other than that, being whatever age I am now, which I don't know the hexadecimal for it, is the best. I think it's fantastic. Anyway,
I mean, to be clear, I looked up the hexadecimal and then set it at 50, and then have been counting since. So I can't do hexadecimal to decimal in my head. I will admit the truth.
Cannot either.
You've got me to admit the truth. I looked it up a long time ago, and I've just been adding one each year since.
I gotcha. That was my big gotcha question, Bradley. Again,
big gotcha. Did you really convert hexadecimal?
That's what this whole thing was about. This was all a massive setup. I've been working with the OSI to make this happen, just to get you here to admit that. Bradley, good luck over the next week. If I know for a fact that absolutely everyone from the OSI is going to watch this, without a doubt. I'm just going to encourage them to follow Bradley's suggestion here and just simply release the numbers so that the story more quickly goes away for you, because as it stands right now, every bit that you hold those numbers back, it just gives yet another arrow into the Lunduke quiver of I'm going to be difficult towards the OSI, and you know how I handle that. So I'm going to keep firing the arrows.
I think at this point, like I think they're a little bit past just releasing the numbers to be right. I actually think they really at this point have to release the anonymized ballots, so they can take each ballot and just have it as a don't say who voted, just say voter 1 this order, voter 2 this order, and then what that will allow is that everybody can run it through every voting algorithm, because they've all been implemented as free and open source software. They can run it through all the different voting algorithms and say, well, who would have wanted to use this algorithm? And then that way the community, I have this idea, maybe you should give data, information, software to the community, and then see what they do with it, and everybody can contribute. And I mean, what would you call that? Open source, maybe?
Who knows?
Who knows, right? But I think releasing the actual ballot data, they've got to do that now, because there's been so many questions raised. I think before that wouldn't have been necessary, but now I think it is. I think they've got to give us the anonymized data, let everybody else run the data through, and figure out.
We could copy and paste that data and send it into one of the AI chatbots that's been authorized under the OSAID. So there we go.
I don't even know which ones have and which one haven't been authorized. The only one I know is that Zuckerberg was denied, right? The Zuckerberg one is not open source, even though they say it's open source because there's no trademark.
How on earth is it so? To me, it's amazing. If you fail to be labeled as OSAID, I mean, that's saying something, because it's so easy to make an OS.
It means you're really proprietary.
You have to really be proprietary. Anyway, again, Bradley, keep up the good work. We'll call it there, because we're about hour 20 now, but this is fantastic.
I mean, are you actually going to air this unedited at this point?
Absolutely. Here's the fun thing about my shows. I never edit, and I never do more than one take. I have a firm rule on all of that. Everyone gets it, and they gets it raw. If I screw something up, it's screwed up, and they just get it. So yes, this will be aired unedited. Everything we've said from the beginning until I hit the stop button, it goes out.
Which means somebody's watching now anyway.
You'd be amazed.
It's too long.
And I know you don't hang out on like X and whatnot. I
just started using the Fediverse Mastodon thing. I don't really like those kind of services. Whatever their license, I don't like them that much anyway. But I started it basically for the OSI election.
You'll be happy to know that tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people will be watching this on closed source and proprietary platforms. So
I hope they will consider a free and open source alternative. And I know, I think it's good that I saw you release all your videos DRM free as well. They can just be downloaded as MP4s. Like, that's very good.
Oh, dude, isn't that sweet? Yeah.
It's very
I do that for me. The number of people that grab it that way is like this, right? Most people watch it on X or grab the audio podcast, which I guess is also DRM free. But for me, like, I love the idea of I wanted to like subscribe to my favorite TV shows, and when they come out, I just go click to download an MP4 file. Like, that would be living the dream for me. So that's me putting it out there in the universe, hoping someone copies it. Anyway.
Well, I believe in DRM free, and so I'm really glad that you do that.
Do you now? That's a surprise.
Surprising I'm against DRM? Wait, you're being sarcastic. Now I get it.
Lunduke Journal exclusive. Thank you again, Bradley. And tell everyone where they go to your blog so they can read up as you post other stuff.
My blog is not that active, but it's at eb.org/bkuhn. It's active lately because of the OSI thing. eb.org/bkuhn. I'm on the Fediverse because of the OSI election. Like, I created an account to run. I don't know what I'm going to do after the election's over. I'm not sure, but it's bkuhn@floss.social.
Can I tell you a secret? I have 2 accounts on the Fediverse. One that's my account, but I can't actually interact with you using that account because so many Fediverse instances have blocked any server that I have an account on. Most Fediverse instances, the big one, have a no Lunduke policy, where if a Lunduke has an account on the server, they block the entire server. So I have a fake account on the server on another server just so I can follow your updates from this.
Well, again, we tried very hard to not get the stuff we disagree about, but it can be you sometimes, Brian.
Nope.
It may not be them. Nope. It can be you.
Have you seen how adorable I am? It's off the charts. It's off the charts. You can't deny it. Bradley Kuhn didn't even try to deny it. Let that record hold on.
Looks don't get you everything. You know that.
It's close. Thank you again, Bradley. You're fantastic. Keep it up. We'll check in with this. Hopefully we have some interesting news, some good news from the OSI in the coming days. I doubt it. Okay. It's not going to go well, but that's fine. It is what it is, and we put all the information out there. With that, ladies and gentlemen, go follow Bradley wherever he's at, because you should, even though he doesn't really hang out on the social networks and the stuff.
Man,
he's old. It's fine.
I'm old. I'm a mailing list person. I really am. It's like email lists.
I love it. It's fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerds and nerdettes across the inner tubes, I do declare, end broadcast.